Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Overrated Experience Sports and Sports Betting Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Blondin. This is episode, I think, 48. Has it been that long? It seems like today is an anniversary of some sort. 48 episodes is a pretty big deal. So welcome for everybody who is returning, and thank you for everybody who is joining for the first time. The Overrated Experience Sports and Sports Betting Podcast gives you my thoughts and feelings on the world's top sports stories, including all the betting action that I feel relevant to you, the square bettor, the common Joe, the common person who pulls out a few $100s here or there, maybe a few dollars here and there, maybe not even a couple hundred, and likes to throw a few dollars down on the games or multiple games, parlays, same game parlays. That's what kind of the square bettor world looks like. You can follow the Overrated Experience Sports and Sports Betting Experience on Twitter or X at Overrated EXPER2. That's Overrated Oh man, let me start again. Wow. Overrated EXPER2. And if you do join us, please mention and let us know that you're joining us based on listening to the podcast. Glad to have you aboard. This week we got a lot of action. We had some madness. Amazing week so far of the opening week of the March Madness. And then we got the sweet 16 left here in the weekend coming up, Easter weekend. Also, NFL news. We will be looking at some of the rule changes that have been announced. Some very, very impactful rule changes. How would that, you got to really think how this impact the betting world going into next season. Also, a draft pick, or at least a player, a quarterback that seems to be getting a lot of buzz that might be going up the draft board, which may also be something to think about when it comes to NFL draft betting. The NFL draft is in late April, so this might pick up some steam and a lot of conversation about what some teams will do to move up in the draft to grab this players. We'll talk about that. MLB kicks off tomorrow, so this is a good sign for you folks out there looking for summertime. 15 games kick off in opening day tomorrow. I'm going to also put an asterisk beside that because I know we've already confirmed at least the Phillies game's been rained out. A lot of rain going around the eastern seaboard, so 15 games may not kick off. And we'll touch a little bit about the Shohei Ohtani betting scandal with his interpreter being alleged to have stolen money from Shohei for an illegal bookie. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And we're going to kick it off with some just opening thoughts. I can't explain my feelings more adamant about the NHL in regards to how difficult it is to bet the NHL. It is such a league of parity. It is hard to grasp what these trends are in a given night. Last night, I had a parlay that was banking on the Colorado Avalanche and the Montreal Canadiens to go over 5.5 goals. So here's the story here. So Colorado has won 9 straight games. Odds-on favorite to win the Stanley Cup. Montreal going nowhere. On the road, heading to Colorado and win 2-1. And literally less than a minute into this game, there were 2 goals scored, one by each team, and then Montreal capped it off, making it 2-1 at the end of the first, and the game ends 2-1. How can you see that coming? Then tonight, had a parlay going with the Ottawa Senators, Buffalo Sabres, over 5.5, alternate line. That game was 4-0 minutes into that game. 5-0 by the end of the first. The Sabres are being booed off the ice. This game easily goes over the 5.5. But I'm banking on an alternative total as well, with the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Boston Bruins to go over 4.5. This game's set at a 6.5 total. This game is 1-1 after 1, 2-1 after 2. Tampa Bay scores midway through the third period. Goals called off. I believe it was an offside. I honestly was following. I didn't see the reasons why it was called off. Tampa Bay scores an empty netter. I don't get the over. I mean, the game was 2-1, 6 minutes into the second period, and it fails to go over. And that's, give me Boston one more goal, and we're at a 2-2, I get the over. This is why the NHL may be the most difficult sport to bet. God forbid I take a side. God forbid I take a side. The Edmonton Oilers the other night headed to Ottawa. This is the other night. I can't remember what night it was. Need them for a parlay. They go up 1-0, 2-0, down up 2-1, up 3-1, blow a lead, lose to the Ottawa Senators. What a joke. It's a joke. The NHL, I will continue to bet because I'm an idiot, I'm a moron, and I enjoy the action of sitting there on a Saturday night, watching a hockey game with money on the line. But for you bettors out there, the NHL is not the way to go. Maybe props are the way to go. Maybe that's the best way to look at it. Shots on goal, power play points, goals, etc. But if you're looking at head-on-head especially, there's way too much parity in the NHL to get a read on what should play out on a nightly basis. All right, so going into the topics at hand, I'm going to get to the NFL first here. Let's go with the quick news topics. The NFL announced some major rule changes that will make the NFL look dramatically different next year. I'm going to go through them and I'll give you my thoughts on each one of them and how I think will impact the game. First of all, up front is a disclosure. The NFL has a mantra of NFL player safety, which is bullshit. Bullshit. Okay? These NFL owners look at this as a business and bleeding out as much profit and franchise value as they possibly can. I don't know if you've ever watched the movie Goodfellas. If you haven't seen Goodfellas, you shouldn't be listening to this podcast because that's the kind of fan base I want here. So there's a scene where Paulie, the mob boss, buys out and takes a piece of the action in the restaurant that they go to. So the owner's giving them a piece of the action to hopefully keep the restaurant going. But, when the mob takes over, all they're doing is going to maximize and run it into the ground until eventually they got to burn it down and get the insurance money. Like you've seen the scenes where the meat's coming in and place an order, run the credit limit up for the shop and the restaurant, and nobody's going to pay them back, and they pocket as much as they can until it's all over, and they just max out the profit and walk away onto the next scheme. I get a feeling that the NFL ownership and the way that and the reasons why these billionaires and trillionaires eventually will have to be trillionaires are buying these teams are for these very reasons, to look at the long-term profit, stay in as long as they can until they can cash out, and really not think of the benefit of the long-term health of the game and forget about the players. It's over. So we know that the NFL is going to kick off in Brazil. Game 2 of the season is going to take place on a Friday. The Eagles look like they're going to take on the Browns, but it could be the Packers apparently. And that's going to be exclusive on Peacock, which was a problem last year in the playoffs when the Kansas City Chiefs took on the Dolphins. As many Americans, us Canadians, just simply turned it on, no problem. But for you Americans out there, you had to subscribe, if you didn't already, to Peacock, which you did not want to do. Now that's going to have to happen again if you want to catch the Eagles taking on the Browns, apparently. And then announced that the NFL will be holding 2 Christmas Day games this year. And when does Christmas fall on this year? On a Wednesday. They had publicly announced that they would never or not hold games. I don't know if they particularly said Wednesday or said Christmas if it falls on a Wednesday. But now they're announcing 2 games that will be on a Wednesday for Christmas. Why? Because the ratings. Why? Because of the money. Why? Because they can sell the rights. And how do you tinker around with the schedule on that? Eventually, we're going to go to 18 games from 17. Every team's going to have an international game or 2. So and now we get to the rule changes, which are apparently for player safety, or is it apparently for probably a bigger investment to what do you call wimpinize the game so that these players can last through a season and we have fewer injuries for the sake of protecting the investment, not under the guise of player safety? That's what I think it is. And I think they're jumping the shark a little too quick. With too many of significant rule changes will make the game look different. So let's kick it off here. And no pun intended, because we're going to talk about the kickoff. So kickoff, and I'm looking at Yahoo Sports here as my reference as I go through this. So it's hard to explain, and we're going to learn more as we approach training camp. But the kickoff rule is going to significantly change, where if you're kicking off, it's going to look more like a punt, and you'll have an idea what it looks like in the UFL, which is the combo USFL, whatever, in XFL that's going to be joining for the spring league. Now, if you want a better idea, you're going to watch that. So it's almost like the 11 players. There's going to be 2 returners, apparently, for the team receiving the kick. The rest of the guys are going to be blocking. And the team kicking off, well, it's going to be more like a punt. And the idea is to punt it within 20 to the goal line. And the guys blocking or trying to tackle cannot move and start their approach to the runner until the ball is touched by the player or hits the ground, to my understanding. So you're going to notice that the ball is going to be in the air, and these guys are going to be standing there waiting. And the idea is that you have a return on each play, but these guys are not building up such speed that you might have heavy collisions. It looks weird, may take a lot of time to get used to. I don't know if it's going to work. I don't know if it's going to look the way you want the NFL to look, but it's going to look absolutely different. The one I just don't understand is the hip drop tackle is banned. It will be a 15-yard penalty if a player... You've seen it all the time. So basically, the explanation is, and I'm going to read it off again. Yahoo Sports is my reference here. It is a foul if the player uses the following technique to bring a runner to the ground. A, grabs the runner with both hands or wraps the runner with both arms and unweights himself by swerving or swiveling and dropping his hips and or lower body, landing on, trapping the runner's legs or leg at or below the knee. So you've seen it all the time. There's been injuries, no question about it. But it becomes more and more difficult for the defender to try to bring especially somebody in the secondary who's maybe being outweighed by 30, 40 pounds, trying to bring that person down before they get into the end zone. So I'm a little head scratcher on that one. So that's a big one. Some other changes, not including on the field rules, but just going in order on what's on Yahoo Sports. The NFL trade deadline has also been moved back 1 week. So week 9 versus week 8. And the idea here, I guess, is that at this point, many more teams will be in the playoff picture, which should probably drive more action on trade deadline, but we'll see what happens there. Coaches get a third challenge. So right now, a coach would get a third challenge if they were correct on both challenges. However, the change will be that if they're correct on one of the 2 challenges, they will be eligible for that third challenge, which is different. I don't understand this. I'll have to get more explanation on this, but enforcement of fouls on change of possession during a play that results in a possession change. If fouls are committed by both teams, any major fouls, like unnecessary roughness, that were committed before the possession change will now be enforced. Interesting. Changes to replay are that the replay changes the owners approved this week. The replay assistant will now be allowed to correct objectively incorrect calls for intentional grounding and roughing the passer. So many people have screamed that they do not like how roughing the passer has been called over the last few years. It's really been inconsistent, a tough job for the referee, and intentional grounding as well. A lot of it is he out of the pocket or not? So that one I can understand. That you notice that this year that the NFL incorporated that a ruling on the field would happen and somebody would call down from the booth and say, no, you're wrong, and they would quickly reverse it instead of going through a lengthy review. That's the idea here, the roughing the passer. We'll see how this turns out. The idea sounds right. We'll see how it's incorporated. Also some tinkering with designated players to return. I don't understand. Thanks to the rule change proposed by the Detroit Lions, teams now will have a limited number of designated to return transactions during the playoffs. And the emergency quarterbacks, which I think is a good move here, is that the third quarterback had to be on the 53-man roster and be brought up. Didn't have to dress, but could be available if they're on the 53-man roster. But apparently now they could also be brought up if they're sitting on the practice squad, which I think is a smart move by the NFL. But the hip toss or tackle, I think that hip drop tackle, that is, I think that's a little too much. I think that you're putting the referees in a tough spot to make that call. I think that will be the controversial play. And again, tinkering way too much, too fast for, I think, the wrong reasons for the NFL. Get your head out of your ass. You're going to ruin the sport. You have a gold mine. How much money do you need? How much money do... I know that we're looking at it from a corporate perspective, and it's a snowball effect, and that snowball is going to grow as high and as big as possible as far as financial terms. But you have to understand that you're going to eventually make one or two changes, and one of these may be one of those that's going to kill the popularity and the profitability of what you have in front of you that could last a lifetime. So that's my take on that. We also have another NFL story. So since the conclusion of the season, we've been looking forward to the NFL draft that's going to take place in the last week of April. It looks like Caleb Williams is a no-brainer. He's going to be drafted first overall by the Bears. The Bears have traded Justin Fields to the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's gone, so there's no question. Like I said, he's going there. But what the biggest story right now is that it's possible that 4 quarterbacks can go off the board right off the bat. So, no surprise that Caleb Williams is going to be the guy that's going to the Bears. As far as number 2, 3, and 4, that's where it gets a little murky. It looks like the Washington Commanders are going to take a quarterback. That's what you would think. And Jaden Daniels seems to be the guy out of LSU. And he's projected to be the top. He's minus 115 to go number 2. Drake Mayo is projected as the third favorite. And up the board is J.J. McCarthy, Michigan Wolverine national champion quarterback under Jim Harbaugh, who's now the head coach of the LA Chargers. And McCarthy was not on the radar to be a top 5 pick, if he was to even be a first-round pick. And now he is up the board and is knocking on the door to be potentially the 2nd overall pick, knocking on the door that teams are going to trade massive amount of collateral to move up, aka either the Minnesota Vikings, maybe the Denver Broncos, maybe the Patriots trade back. And I was listening to the VSiN podcast today on the Follow the Money, great show by the way, that is John Harbaugh, Jim Harbaugh pumping the tires of his former quarterback so that Marvin Harrison Jr. drops to him at 5. I mean, is there a game here? And a lot of there is gamesmanship on pumping the tires on certain prospects so that teams will jump on them while other players become available. So it's a mind game. It's teams are falling in love with this guy, and I think it's fool's gold. We've seen it many times. You got 4 quarterbacks that might be taken in the first 4 picks, and the percentage of that are going to actually turn out are very low. So J.J. McCarthy, you may see him in a Bronco uniform. You may see him in a Viking uniform. But I think people are jumping the gun a little too quick on that. Well, that's the NFL story. That's the big dog when it comes to sports. But there is some madness going on, and we are through the 64-32, and we're on to the Sweet 16 here for March Madness. And I hope you guys had a great bracket. I know in my bracket, I sit 3rd out of 13 people. And then the lady from upstairs who is looking from she's actually a season ticket holder. She's watching the podcast in the first row amongst the crowd. And she's actually sitting in 2nd place. Congratulations to her so far. So we'll kick it off tomorrow, Thursday night, with Sweet 16 action. And the key is right now is that pretty much everybody has UConn. UConn is smashing teams. They look like they're going to roll their way to back-to-back national championships. They're on fire. They're covering spreads. But the key to victory here now is who do you got going to the Final Four? Now, I took a bit of a flyer on NC State to make a run. They made the Sweet 16. They got to go through a few tough teams here. Can they make it? I can't see why not. The problem with some of the matchups are definitely a challenge. So I'm going to talk about that in a minute, who I like going into Sweet 16. But I wanted to kind of walk through some of the roller coaster of adventure that I was on during March Madness. And when you start writing your notes and you start looking at the number of wagers you put on through a 4-day span, it kind of surprises you that maybe I should call a hotline because you got a problem, but that's neither here nor there. But the day kicked off with the thought, based on some of the listening to other podcasts, that some of these teams might be a little sleepy when it comes to early games on the Thursday. And look at the unders as good plays. And I thought, that's a smart idea. And I kicked it off fantastic on Thursday afternoon. Michigan State, Mississippi State, under first half. That paid off. And then, of course, right into 2 straight losses. All right. So that's, small wager to kick off the tournament. Then you get into BYU getting smashed and upset. Boise State and Colorado over 122.5. That goes under. Can't get the points. My parlay, including BYU, took me down. BYU just could not get back in it. They kept creeping back, and just could not pull the trigger and get that win. It was very upsetting. So that was a nice little start, and it went sour a bit. And then later in the afternoon, we had some good luck with some unders. And I'm traditionally not an under player, but got 2 straight wins of unders with a couple games there. And then a parlay win with Illinois over, and then another Oregon, South Carolina over, which is great. We then go into another period of losses. Parlay with Gonzaga winning. But of course, you're going to focus here a little bit on Kentucky. Kentucky is 7.5-point favorite coming into this game against Oakland. And the idea that Kentucky was going to come back and cover the spread was probably out the window very early in this game. Oakland was dropping threes like no tomorrow. And I tuned in a little later in the second half. And just to watch Kentucky puke all over themselves every time they were, a possession away from tying the ball game, maybe taking the lead. There'd be a turnover, a bad shot decision. Really poor effort by Kentucky. Just horrible. And John Calipari had his program built on the idea that NBA-ready talent would head to Kentucky, dominate, the college system for 1 year, and they would all not graduate, but they would move on to the NBA. There's no question he develops NBA-type players. But in this idea of bringing these players that's going to also equal success in the tournament, that's going downhill, and it's going downhill fast. This team is not ready. And with the new way of money making in NCAA basketball with the name, likeness, image, and NIL, where players can make money, players are sticking around longer. These are boys playing men. So his process, his step is outdated. I understand they're going to keep him, but that Kentucky method is old and time to get rid of it. We'll see what they do. But poor performance, disgusting performance, and they puked all over themselves for sure. And just trying to look at some other news and notes, going through all these plays. Too many of them go through. I'm just trying to give you the highlights. Another highlight was Florida Atlantic versus Northwestern. I don't know if you watched this game, but for the first, 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes of this ball game, Florida Atlantic should have buried Northwestern. Northwestern could not shoot. They could not score. And Florida Atlantic, can go back to what Kentucky did, puked all over themselves, could not shoot, consistently turned the ball over. And then it got to the second half where Northwestern started to pick it up and score. And Florida Atlantic makes a charge at the end. They take the lead in the final minute. Opportunity to go up, by a couple points. By 3 actually, missed free throw, which you knew was going to happen. They give up the time bucket, and then coming down the court, no urgency, should have finished it off, or at least drove the rim, nothing. Go to overtime and get smoked. So they really pissed away their opportunity. They made a Final Four run last year. They did the opposite this year. Disgusting performance by Florida Atlantic. Other highlights in my up and down roller coaster of a tournament. Oh, this hurt. In the Yukon Stetson first round matchup, the first half over under was 70.5. This finished at 71. And Stetson, buzzer beater at the end of the first half, jump shot from the free throw area, hits it. They scored 13, 14 points in the first half at best. And Buddy decides to go on full Michael Jordan in that last shot. Those are the kind of ones that just, punch in the balls, and it's not good. Not good at all. Western Kentucky, I fell prey to the idea that they were up big against Marquette in that first half. And I moved too early, took them at plus 5.5 with a big lead. And for you bettors out there that took Western Kentucky at anything, they choked in the second half, losing by the regular spread. I lost on what that was, but I lost that, and that didn't feel good. Another news and notes. Okay, I'll leave it off with the news and notes to the Gonzaga. No, two more. Gonzaga, Kansas. I had the game second half over 169.5. One team showed up in the second half. One team didn't. Gonzaga smoked Kansas. Kansas is done. That game fell well under 169.5. That didn't fall for me. And we also have two more. Oh, yeah. So we have Alabama. No, we're going to talk about the Houston. Oh, sorry, we're going to talk about UConn. So UConn took on Northwestern. That was a nail-biter. 13.5 point spread that UConn covered. They were up like 20 plus, like 30 almost. And then Northwestern chipped away. So I squeaked that out, got the win, but that was a little bit of a scary one there. But the game that really just stood out to me as I got the win, but like you really had to sweat it, was Houston in overtime over Texas A&M. And if you watch this game, and this was the second last game on the Sunday night, the end of the second round, where Texas A&M hit that last minute three to tie the ball game up, where, we have a couple seconds left, and Houston can't get to the 3-point area where the only option Texas A&M would have is to hit a three. I have no idea what play defensively they were drawing up there, but to allow that to happen is absolutely disgusting. Luckily, they came through in overtime. They started losing players to, Houston was losing a lot of their stars to foul trouble. So if that game would have went to another overtime, they might have been squeezed out by Texas A&M for sure. So that's the recap of what my adventure was in the first 4 days of the tournament. Wild ride. Exciting ride. Wish I was in Vegas to enjoy it. It's up there with obviously NFL action. Those first 4 days of NCAA basketball action. Wild stuff. But let's get to the Sweet 16 here. Sweet 16 kicks off Thursday, 7:09, and it kicks off with Clemson in Arizona. Clemson in Arizona right now. And again, I'm just kind of giving you my idea, spitballing of what I think I'm looking at. Right now, this line's jumped up a little bit from 6.5 to 7.5 in favor of Arizona. I was kind of looking at Arizona at 6.5 to cover 7 points and kind of shine away now that it's bumped up a point. But I was also thinking, maybe using Arizona as part of a parlay, and that money line's now up to 320, is it? That's not good. But I'm thinking under 152.5. I don't, I'm not, neither of these teams were in a game over 152.5 so far this tournament. So why does it start now? You got to believe that both teams are going to be cautious coming to this game at some point, especially in the second half. They don't want to leave. They've gone to the Sweet 16. So I like the under at 152.5 in this one. San Diego, UConn. This is such a mismatch. It's not even funny. Right now, the spread sits at 10.5 in favor of UConn. I have no problem putting a little coin on UConn covering that effort. San Diego State's not so impressive. UConn's a killer. So let's look at UConn to make a run and show up in the Final Four without much of a problem. 9:39, we go to the later games. Alabama, North Carolina. North Carolina bumped up from a 3.5-point favorite to a 4.5-point favorite. I'm looking at this from a standpoint, maybe using UNC as a money line at minus 178 and maybe matching it with something else. I don't know what that something else just yet, but a little shy to take the spread of 4.5 after it jumped to 3.5. Under again, 173.5. I think that's a little too high. So for that, I like the money line to use in a parlay and maybe look at the under in this game. 10:09, last game Thursday night. Illinois takes on Iowa State. I like Illinois in this one at plus 1.5. Give me the points. And I like this to be a high-scoring affair for these two teams, 145.5. Take the over, minus 110. Then we head on to Friday, another 4 games to decide who's going to go to the Final Four. It kicks off with my Final Four Cinderella run, NC State taking on Marquette. NC State is a 6.5-point underdog. Marquette's the favorite in this one. I'm going to look at NC State to at least cover and hope that they actually outright win to get them into the next, the Elite 8 to get into the Final Four and at least help my bracket. I like them to cover 6.5. I'm thinking the idea, if I went with them in the bracket, maybe I look at that plus 235 as a kind of a, there's got to be some upsets here. So it's on my mind. It's on my mind. And I do like some scoring here. This moved up from 150.5 to 151.5 on FanDuel. So I still like the over at 151.5. 7:39, we got Gonzaga kicking off Purdue. Purdue, the number 1 seed, is favored by 5.5 here. And minus 230. And then the over-under is 154.5. Gonzaga, they made runs in this tournament. They can't close the deal by all means, but 5.5, give me Gonzaga. I know Purdue's on a run here, but Gonzaga is a great program, and they've been smashing teams at least the first 2 games in this tournament. And then we go on to Duke and Houston. Duke underdog. Houston, not looking so impressive against Texas A&M. Minus 4.5 over Duke. I wouldn't have any second thoughts to take Duke at the plus number. It was 155. I think it's plus 146 now, I believe. But give me Duke 4.5. Maybe even tease that with NC State. No, maybe tease that with North Carolina from the previous day and maybe make some money there. But Duke is going to stay in this game. They're a real threat to knock Houston off. And I do like the points over 133.5 in this one. Last but not least, we have Creighton taking on Tennessee. Tennessee very defensive, really struggled offensively, but they're here. Creighton, a powerhouse program, plus 2.5. I'm going to take Creighton plus 122 money line. Creighton plus 122 money line. So that's what we have heading in to the Sweet 16. Sweet. And then we're going into the Elite 8, so keep your eyes open to any tweets that are out there, any X's, whatever the hell you want to call it, for any plays heading into Saturday and Sunday's games. But it's just to mention, I don't have any plays on this, but the EPL's back. German League's back. Soccer's back from the international break. So get your research going for your morning card there. Auto racing, Formula One is off week, and then they return. And they are in, I just have this, they're in Japan, I believe. So that's interesting. For Ferrari taking the Australian Grand Prix, that is. Exciting stuff. UFC 300. Start watching your film leading into April 13th. Big card there. MLB kicks off tomorrow. Shohei Ohtani, the story in MLB right now. Shohei Ohtani's interpreter, if you haven't heard, you shouldn't be listening to a betting podcast because it's a pretty known story that the idea is that he's being looked at as sending money to an unregulated bookmaker in the United States. And apparently Ohtani is stating that this interpreter, aka his best friend, had stolen $4.5 million and paid off this bookie, while the friend is saying that Ohtani sounded like he had full knowledge and helped him out to pay off the debt he owed. Now, I guess as things play out, we'll understand the full truth later on. But the interesting story would be what if that Shohei Ohtani was involved in a situation where he did knowingly bet on baseball. What would baseball do to their biggest cash cow? We're going to see. We're going to see sometime soon. Somebody's going to break the story of what really happened, if it's there. Anyway, I hope you enjoy your Sweet 16 matchups. Hope you enjoy the weekend action of soccer. Major League Baseball kicking off tomorrow. NHL, NBA action. We will talk again next week, maybe earlier if I decide to put on another podcast. That'll be up to you. I'll leave that, as a teaser. The pleasure's all been yours. The Overrated experience is over and out. Bye-bye.